Good evening, one and all. I welcome you all for today's webinar. I, Advocate Abhinandan Vagyani, welcome you all on behalf of Advocate Vasantrao Patil, Lawyers Training Center, a counterpart of Sangli Advocates Bar Association. The center was established in the honor of late Shri Vasantrao Patil, a renowned criminal law practitioner. The center was established with the purpose of imparting legal knowledge, inculcating discipline, and for overall development of personality of advocates. Law practice is everything which all lawyers dream of and more. But if you are like most lawyers, you have got some spots where you could benefit from some help, guidance, inspiration, and support. With the spirit of achieving this end, the center has till date held a number of lectures in the past. With great honor, we put forth to you all today's webinar by Honorable Mr. Sanjeev Kadam, a well-known law practitioner, a popular advocate from Bombay High Court, and the President of prestigious Advocates Association of Western India. Sir, we all are grateful to you for joining us today. I request Mr. Kuldeep Patil to take over.
Thank you, Abhinandan. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to introduce our today's speaker, Advocate Sanjeev Kadam. He is currently the president of the Advocates Association of Western India, the oldest bar association of our country, registered in the year 1864. Today, he is going to speak to us on the topic anti-corruption laws. This is a subject which we should all be deeply interested, as it has affected the life of common man. Post-independence, corruption has widely spread, not only in government departments, but also in private and banking sectors. Last 2 decades, we have seen common man losing his hard-earned money deposited in banks due to corrupt practices of the bankers. Our today's speaker has a vast experience and has dealt with large number of cases relating to anti-corruption laws before the trial courts and in appeals arising out of these cases before the Bombay High Court. Now please allow me to share some personal information about today's speaker. Mr. Advocate Sanjeev Kadam completed his graduation in science from the Science College Satara. He studied law at the Government Law College and completed LLB in the year 1989. Since then, Advocate Sanjeev Kadam is practicing at the Bombay High Court, taking up criminal, civil and constitutional matters. Advocate Kadam is a sportsman and recently successfully organized Maharashtra Advocates Cricket League at Mumbai. 86 cricket teams of advocates from all over Maharashtra participated in the cricket tournament. Advocate Sanjeev Kadam has always provided wholehearted support to junior advocates during difficult times. Mr. Kadam took a keen interest and provided financial assistance to advocates affected by floods in Sangli and Kolhapur district. During the current lockdown period, Mr. Kadam, as President of the Advocates Association of Western India, took the initiative and has provided financial assistance to number of junior advocates. Friends, our today's guest is an accomplished lawyer, a sportsman, and a noble human being. Please join me in welcoming Advocate Sanjeev Kadam. Sir, we are all eager to hear you. Sir, Kadam.
Good evening, Kuldeep, Abhinandan, Harshad, Chetan, and all the team, Amita, and all the lawyers. Firstly, I would like to congratulate the people who have started this information and training center in the name of late Advocate Vasantrao Patil. Actually, it's a need of our at the district places because such guidance is available in different forums, different seminars, different lecture series in the towns or metropolitan cities, and they get good speakers to have on different subjects. But today's technology has taken the official lawyers also to enjoy such lectures, right from the advocates in different fields as well as legal eagles whom we can call like Justice Oak, the Chief Justice of Karnataka High Court, then senior counsels like Shirish Gupti, Mr. Mundargi, Mr. Dake Parkar, Mr. Nitin Pradhan, and as well as Delhi High Court judges, and all our people are coming and delivering lecture, including our ex-Advocate General, Mr. Sri Haryani. So this lockdown period, various bar associations and various forums are utilizing the period for enlightening the advocates on different topics, different subjects. And it's one of the good initiative taken by many bar associations, including the Advocates Association of Western India. Well, today's lecture, can't call it a lecture, but today's discussion is on the anti-corruption laws. As my colleague, Mr. Kuldeep Patil, Secretary of the Advocates Association of Western India, rightly said, it is one of the topic touching to the common people because the problem of corruption is a rampart at all the stages of the life. So I begin with my short lecture on the topic. No doubt, not taken on any specific section of the act, but anti-corruption laws. As we all know, I hope English would be suitable, or I can talk in Marathi also. There's no difficulty, or
Sir,
I can use both the languages.
Sir, English should be comfortable to most, sir. English should.
Okay,
Thank you,
as
sir.
you wish.
Thank you.
Okay. So corruption, as we all know, is a means of corrupt practices, malpractices, misconduct. Corruption is defined as a corruption means by corrupt or illegal means obtaining for himself or for any other person any favor or any advantage or any pecuniary advantage, undue advantage is the general meaning. Gain by dishonest or illegal means is called as corruption, or dishonest or fraudulent conduct by a person in power. Then it has various dimensions. Corruption may be for doing something. Corruption may be for not doing something which a public servant is expected to do while performing his duty. Corruption may be amassing wealth which is disproportionate to one's own income or known sources of income. Corruption may be to cheat people by misusing the power given. Corruption may be to cheat people by giving them impression of expecting to be a public servant. It has various dimensions. Corruption has become a part of life as a commonly seen or experienced all over. It has become a common practice for people, especially in particular departments where the common man comes across, like revenue, police, legal, medical, education, everywhere. Quite often people say that I have to pay something to get something done. And to curb all these practices, to control or to prevent all these practices, various corruption laws have been enacted in the country. Now, normally, though we come across, or though normally we deal with Prevention of Corruption Act, there are various enactments which deal with the problem of corruption. Indian Penal Code also deals with the problem of corruption and provides for the offences, including offence under Section 409 of criminal breach of trust by a public servant. Then there is Income Tax Act, where there are criminal prosecution for suppressing the income or filing false returns. Then there is a Benami Transactions Prevention Act 1988, where property is purchased by a person in somebody else's name, though that person has not funded for such property. Then there is a Prevention of Money Laundering Act, where people bring in money or show the money so to show as if that money has been acquired or that wealth has been acquired by legal means, though actually such wealth is acquired by illegal means. These are various enactments, and the last and foremost would be the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. Earlier it was Prevention of Corruption Act 1947. Now, various mechanisms are provided under these acts to either prosecute the wrongdoers and them and to take action to punish them, including now providing for forfeiture of property of such culprits, which is a common feature in Prevention of Money Laundering Act under the Benami Transaction Act, which has been now introduced in PC Act 1988 also. So the government has been trying to provide in different manners to check the corruption, to prevent the corruption, to eradicate the corruption. And the provisions have been made more stringent than earlier by the amendments brought in from time to time. Now, to show a particular property to be acquired illegally is normally the corruption made by private parties also. Now, under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, Enforcement Directorate can take an action. We quite often nowadays see that various, a number of high-end business people or business tycoons or the underworld connected people are prosecuted under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act because the money which has been acquired or the finance which has been acquired by illegal means was being circulated, was being invested in different fields of life. And therefore, all such tainted money has to be traced out and action has to be taken, and therefore provisions have been made under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Tribunals deal with the applications or appeals under that act, and all these acts are providing mechanisms to redress the grievances also, as well as to take action against the culprits. Now, for today's lecture, we will go to the details of Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. As we all know, it is a central enactment enacted on 9th of September 1988 by Act number 49 of 1988. As we all know, earlier it was Prevention of Corruption Act 1947. And various changes have been brought earlier. Section 5 was dealing with the punishment and the misconduct part, which has now been dealt with under Section 13. Sanction provisions are a bit similar, but various other provisions have been included and amended. The Act applies to whole India as well as to people, Indian people living outside India. Now, this Act has hardly 6 to 7 chapters and 31 sections and odd sections. However, it has a very great impact on the society because it deals with the root of the cause, that is corruption. It has been aimed to punish the public servants who indulge into such type of activities or who commit such acts, and or other persons who are in chain or who are in association with such public servants. Now, as we all know, central government and state government are the two main functionaries for the public servants, and therefore the jurisdiction regarding the central government employees is vested with Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, including the central government and the servants of union territories, whereas Anti-Corruption Bureau deals with the offences by the employees of the state government throughout India. Each state has its own Anti-Corruption Bureau, which deals with the offences committed within the territorial jurisdiction of the state. Now, various Section 2 deals with the definitions. One of the most important definition under the Act would be under Section 2C, where a public servant is defined as Public servant is also defined under section 21 of Indian Penal Code. However, the definition under the PC Act, section 2C, is more wider and more exhaustive, covering not only the employees of the government, but the persons authorized by government, the persons appointed by government, the persons acting on behalf of government, the officers acting and appointed by the government officers, judges, persons appointed by judges to do a particular act, including arbitrators. Then it also includes the employees of the corporations of the state or the corporations which are receiving aids from the government. Also includes the cooperative societies funded or aided by the government and the educational institutions which are aided and funded by the government. The office bearers of such educational institutions are also covered under the definition of public servant under section 2C. Now, the judicial officers are also covered. So also, any person appointed by a judge to perform a particular duty or a particular assignment is also covered under the Act, a definition, and therefore he is covered under the provisions of Prevention of Corruption Act. Now, there are other definitions like undue advantage, which may be in any nature, may not be only restricted to the cash, which is in popular term known as bribe. It may be in kind. It may be in different favor being shown for a particular favor shown to such person. In short, undue advantage means an advantage which you are not entitled to legally. Now, section 3 deals with the appointment of special judges. These are judges, special judges are to be appointed by notification by the competent government, and then only they can deal with such offences. Those are referred as special judges. The peculiar fact of special judges is that though session judges are appointed as special judges under the Prevention of Corruption Act, they are also magistrate covered under section 326 of CRPC, and they can take remand, they can consider bail, and no lower court or low magistrate or taluka magistrate or metropolitan magistrate has any power to deal with any matter under the Prevention of Corruption Act. Now, what are the cases triable by the special judges? Naturally, the cases under the Prevention of Corruption Act, but the offences which are covered under the PC Act, as well as the offences under the other acts which are triable along with the provisions of PC Act, can be tried by the learned special judge, may it be under the Indian Penal Code. Procedure as laid down under the Criminal Procedure Code is applicable to all the proceedings of the special judges, and they can try as a regular trial for the offences under the PC Act as well as other offences. Now, investigation of the offences under this Act is also covered by special provisions. It is an offence registered qua the employee or officer of central government. The Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, under the Delhi Police Establishment Act, has power to investigate the matters. For the state employees and officers or the corporations, societies covered by the state aid are investigated by the State Anti-Corruption Bureau. Now, under the Delhi Police Establishment Act, an officer of the rank of Inspector of Police can investigate the offences. Whereas for Anti-Corruption Bureau State, under the PC Act, the offences could be investigated by an officer of the rank of Assistant Commissioner of Police as far as the metropolitan areas are concerned, and by the Deputy Superintendent of Police for the Mofussil areas. Now, any investigation not carried out within the provisions as said above would be a bad investigation, and that investigation could be defective. Therefore, a specific officer has to investigate the matter. Then, proceeding further, Chapter 3 deals with the important part of the Act, right from Section 7 till Section 16. The offences and penalties are provided for. Section 7 deals with offences relating to public servant being bribed. Now, what is bribe? Bribe is a reward either in cash or in kind, accepted by a public officer, public servant, either for showing a favor or obtaining some undue advantage by favoring a person, by performing certain act in his favor, or by forbidding to perform such act in connection with such person. All those persons' offences are covered under Section 7. Section 7(a) deals with taking undue advantage to influence public servant by corrupt or illegal means by exercise of personal influence. Means a superior officer or a person having superior position than a other officer, if he is taking undue advantage by putting such person under influence due to his position, due to his ranking, due to his status in service, is also corrupt practice, and it is also one of the corruption and covered under Section 7(a). Now, offences relating to bribing of a public servant is covered under Section 8. When you make an attempt to bribe a public servant and a complaint is filed, which is called as a reverse trap, that is also punishable. In that sense, you need not be a public servant. But if a common man is trying to bribe a public servant, approaches him, wants a particular favor to be done in his favor, but the officer goes on performing his duty within the parameters of the law or the procedure laid down, and in that case, if the common person or the person who wants the favor offers the bribe to such public servant, a complaint can be lodged and such person can be arrested in a trap and he can be punished. Section 9 deals with offences related to bribing of a public servant by commercial organization. Now, this is one of the new arena, which is not new as such, but which is now reported on a large scale nowadays, where commercial organizations trying to get their work done in an illegal manner or expeditiously by surpassing other people in the queue, or in different methods they want the work to be done. They want the officers to overlook the defects, deficiencies, maybe in sanctioning of plan, maybe permitting some work to be done without permission, or which is not legal, construction than the sanctioned FSI, various such works are required to be completed by the commercial organization. And such type of organization is a financially superpower which tries to purchase the public servant or the government officer by bribing him or her, and they want their work to be done by one way or the other. Therefore, such specific offences are dealt with under Section 9. And under Section 10, the person in charge of such commercial organization, if proved, is held to be guilty of the offences. Now, person in charge may be again whether to prove whether a particular person, if it is a limited company, there may be director, there may be managing director, there may be officers, but the investigation agency would charge the people who were actually in charge and in command. And there may be judgments, or there are judgments, or there may be arguments that whether one accused was really in fact in charge of the business or not. However, considering the large-scale offences or large-scale such misconducts being revealed, these provisions are important, and commercial organizations always can say that it's a company and I had not done it any personally, and therefore Section 10 deals with the person officially in charge. Now, next would be the public servant obtaining undue advantage without consideration from person concerned in proceeding or business transaction by such public servant. Then 12 is punishment for abatement of offences. Abatement may be in different manners. Abatement may be by actually assisting the public servant. Abatement may be by being an agent between the bribe giver or common man and the public servant. Abatement may be by being a junior officer or a lower cadre officer acting on behalf of the higher officer. Quite often, this type of cases are reported where the lower cadre officers or employees are actually arrested while accepting the bribe, and they are trapped. And the peculiar feature of such type of cases is the person who accepts the bribe is never a demander of the bribe. And person who is caught says that I had never demanded the bribe, I never called for the money, I never asked for any favor. I had no control or I had no power to show any favor to this person. Therefore, there is no question of being guilty of any corrupt act. But same time it is on behalf of a higher officer or superior officer. And then a defense is commonly taken that I have not accepted the bribe. Any lower clerk or peon may demand something or may accept something by taking my name, but I have no control over him. What does he say? However, I have never met, I have never demanded, and I have never accepted. Because during trial, demand and acceptance of the bribe has to be proved, especially in trap cases. And such defenses are always taken. Cases are seen where bribes are directed to be given to a panwala or a shopkeeper or a small stall holder. And when a person goes to, for example, a police officer, and he says for a particular favor from the officer says, okay, I'll do it for you. You go to XYZ and he will tell you what is to be done. And then he goes to that XYZ at a particular place, and then XYZ tells, okay, you have to pay this much, and then boss or Saab will do your work. And then a complaint is lodged, and then that panwala or that shopkeeper or that stall owner is arrested while accepting the bribe, and the chain reaches to the officer. So therefore, abatement is an important provision to enable the prosecution to prove the persons, not only the main government servant or public servant, but also the abettors, helping the culprits to commit the offences. Thereafter, the main provision under section 13. It is for criminal misconduct by public servants. Section 13, 1, A to E are the provisions covered. Now, 13.1A uses the word habitually accepts or obtains or agrees to accept or attempts to obtain for any person for himself any favor from any person for himself or for any other person any gratification other than the legal remuneration as a motive or reward such as mentioned in section 7. Now, the motive, reward, favor, it may be in any color, but main thing is other than the legal remuneration. Now, many government offices, establishments, a person is required to deposit various fees. He has to deposit through challan, various charges, royalties, fees to the government. And therefore, an officer may be entitled to accept a particular amount. But for expediting his proposal or to do favor to him to complete his work, bribe is demanded. And then if the legal remuneration is rupees 500 and rupees 2000 is accepted, naturally the 1500 would be an amount other than the legal remuneration. Therefore, now section 13.1b covers same thing with any other valuable thing. Subsection C covers if dishonestly or fraudulently misappropriates or converts for his own use any property entrusted to him. Various officers are entrusted the properties, valuables, cash. Now this banking frauds nowadays, the cashiers and the managers are in charge of the entrusted with the huge cash amounts of the public banks. And if those amounts are misappropriated or converted for one's own use without following the due procedure of law, that is an offense covered under 13.1c. Then 13.1d deals with if he by corrupt or illegal means obtains for himself or for any other person any valuable thing or pecuniary advantage by abusing his position as a public servant is clause 2, and while holding office as public servant obtains such pecuniary advantage without any public interest. Now, all these are all facets of section 13.1 A to D, covers all types of corrupt means which could be committed by the officers or public servants. Section 13.1E is a different type of provision which provides for prosecuting an officer or a public servant for amassing the wealth which is disproportionate to his known sources of income. Now, 13.1E, there are two typical peculiar features: disproportionate to his income. The wealth is disproportionate to his income. The government or public servant, all his remuneration, salary, perks are on record. His joining of service is on record. His returns are filed. His internal information is necessary to be submitted to the government. Therefore, his income is from all sources is on record and should be on record. Therefore, the wording uses from the known sources of income. Now, there is a debate many times, what is known sources of income? whether a person, government servant, has any other source than the salary or legal remuneration can be called as a known source of income if it is known to himself or his family. The answer would be no. Known sources of income means it should be known to the employer, it should be known to the government, it should be known to the corporation for whom you work. And it should be disclosed. If there is an income from any other source than the employment, such income should be disclosed, made known to the government, and or at least it should have been reflected in the income tax returns. And it should be audited, certified by the income tax authority. Otherwise, it would maybe a defense, but you still can be prosecuted for possession of disproportionate asset than the known source of income. Section 7 as is referred in section 13. Section 7 deals with public servant taking gratification other than legal remuneration. So what is the undue advantage or what is the bribe in different moods is specially dealt with under section 7, legal remuneration in respect of an official act. And whoever being or expecting to be a public servant accepts or obtains such bribe is punishable under section 7 of the PC Act. Or it covers for all the persons under definition of a public servant as defined under section 2C, which we discussed earlier. Now here is one new aspect introduced, or which is a different aspect therein, is that expecting to be a public servant means it covers not only the persons who are actually public servant or who are already public servant, but a person who is expecting to be a public servant, if he obtains such illegal reward, gratification, reward, whatever you may call, from a person, giving him an impression that I am going to be a public servant, for doing an act in his favor after he becomes a public servant, that is also covered under section 7. Now suppose a person appears to the different people of the society and tells them that I am going to be a inspector in charge of your police station, and therefore I would be doing this for you if you pay me this much now. And subsequently it is found that he was in fact not even selected in the police force, whether he would be a person expecting to be a public servant and whether he would be tried under the provisions of PC Act. The answer given is in the explanation, no. At the most he could be tried for cheating the members of public, because there was no such material to suggest that he was expecting to be a public servant. Though he might have given that impression to the people that he is expecting to be a public servant. However, that itself would not attract the offense under section 7, and it might attract the provisions of section provisions of cheating under the Indian Penal Code. Now, section 13, thereafter 14 deals with punishment for habitual offenders, 16 deals with fine provisions, etc., etc. Chapter 4 deals with investigation, and section 17 deals with persons authorized to investigate. So those persons specified under section 17, as I said earlier, Inspector of Police for the Delhi Police Establishment Act, SCP for the Metropolitan Region, and DYSP for the Mofussil Region are the persons who could carry out the investigation under the Act. Now section 17A brought in by the amendment deals with inquiry or investigation of offences relatable to recommendation made or decisions taken by public servant in discharge of official function. this is also another important aspect of law introduced, which covers the affairs of the public functioning on a large scale. We quite often see that in a regular course of duty, various files are processed through the hierarchy of the offices in the departments, which involve high stakes, which deal with very important decisions on financial matters and other matters of the state government or central government, or which deals with tenders of crores of rupees, or which deals with tenders of important aspects like defense, security, etc. Maybe purchase of aircrafts, purchase of weapons from the foreign countries, purchase of boats, submarines, a lot of things. Now, any recommendations made on this file, if seen by one perspective, may be a regular recommendation made in course of duty. But there may be certain recommendations which favor particular corporations or particular contractors or particular person, or there may be certain recommendation which do not mention particular adverse remarks or adverse parts or adverse position of a party or a contractor or a bidder. And in that case, the file is processed on the basis of such recommendation, and the decision is influenced by such recommendation. Then an inquiry or investigation can be conducted under Section 17A of the Act regarding the discharge of official functions, whether the particular officer was within his power to give such recommendation, whether such recommendation was within the four corners of the parameters of the law, rules and regulations laid down, whether the recommendation is favoring a particular person, corporation, establishment, etc. All can be dealt with under Section 17A. Now, Section 18 deals with power to inspect banker books. Now, the large-scale bank scams, which we can call, maybe Yes Bank recently reported, Punjab and Maharashtra Bank or other banks, mergers. All these matters, the bankers' books play a vital role. Those are important documents, and therefore the power to the investigation agency to inspect such. Now, leaving the other miscellaneous provisions, we go to Section 19, where previous sanction is necessary for prosecution of a public servant. Any public servant before being prosecuted, there has to be a sanction to prosecute by a competent authority. Now, such competent authority is an authority which is empowered to remove that person from service, and that person can grant sanction to prosecute such public servant. The power is with the sanctioning authority either to grant sanction or refuse sanction. Recently, there was one judgment of refusing sanction to prosecute the ex-chief minister of the state of Maharashtra in the matter of a land scam in Mumbai. Sanction once granted or sanction once refused, can it be reviewed again, is one of the interesting aspects of this provision. In a case where sanction is refused on the basis of material available before the sanctioning authority, a sanction cannot be reviewed and granted again on the same material as held by Supreme Court in Sarin's case by Justice Loda's bench. However, the law is well settled that if there is some new material or fresh material before the sanctioning authority and it is produced before such sanctioning authority, a fresh sanction or a reverse, means earlier if it was refused, there can be a sanction on basis of new material. and that is not bad in law. Normal procedure is once a decision is taken, it cannot be reviewed by the same authority. However, the law judgment lays down that if there is a new material produced before such sanctioning authority, the earlier decision can be reviewed and fresh sanction can be granted. Now, there is a provision of presumption under section 20 where a public servant accepts any undue advantage, then there is a presumption that he has accepted it as a bribe and it is punishable under the provisions of PC Act. And section 21, accused person to be a competent witness, etc. Now, in the trial, what is important for the prosecution to prove as far as the offences under the provisions of Prevention of Corruption Act? The popular segment of this act, as the public knows, is the trap, which has reported on a large scale in the newspaper that XYZ, an officer, MD, or a general manager, or a superintendent is trapped today by the Anti-Corruption Bureau. The procedure has been prescribed when a person aggrieved by the demand of bribe goes to the officer, the information is written down, and then it has to be verified. Normally, the demand is verified by sending an independent pancha witness with the complainant or informant to the person or officer demanding the bribe. It is tried to be confirmed whether there is really a demand. Now, there may be misuse of such provisions also. Various persons want their work to be done by one or the other way or means. Take an example, if an honest officer goes as per the procedure, many people don't like the speed, the procedure, the numbering pattern, and they want their work to be done expeditiously or at once. There are instances where such officers are trapped in false cases of the demand of bribe so as to remove them from that particular department, particular posting. Because once there is a trap and once you are accused of an offense under Prevention of Corruption Act, you are put under suspension. The public servant is put under suspension. And therefore, he doesn't hold that post. And by that mean, he loses that particular posting. He is kept under suspension. Then after investigation, maybe there is no material, he may be exonerated. There may not be charge sheet, there may not be a sanction. Or such person has to face that full trial, and then after his innocence is proved in the court, he is reinstated in service. Of course, there is another hurdle for him to face the departmental inquiry also. So, confirmation of demand is one of the important aspects of the trap cases. Now, confirmation may be either physically, personally, by a punch witness, by seeing and by hearing personally what is the demand. It may be that a pancha is not accompanying the complainant, but because presence of a third person along with the informant may alert the demander, the public servant, and therefore various occasions, microphone and recording, micro recorder and all that system is followed by the officers, or there is a recording of the telephonic conversation by confirming the number of the parties, by drawing the panchanamas and then recording it on a disc and then preserving those discs, etc. And then all that recording is to be put in the manuscript and then proved in the court. Sometimes there is a question of spectrographic test, etc., etc. Then after the demand is verified and the investigating officer thinks that there is a substance in the complaint, then a trap is led for the amount, and then phenolphthalein powder, panchas, all that procedure. And then again, he has to be accompanied by an independent person acting as a punch. and the informant has to carry the bribe, and actually the bribe is to be handed over to the person only on demand of such gratification. Now, there is actually, once a public servant is found as the let down under section 20 with the bribe amount, those numbers are noted, powder is applied, and therefore, if that money is tainted money is found with the public servant, there is a presumption against him under section 20. So what could be the probable defenses for the public servant? The probable defenses, according to me, would be: one, I had no connection with the informant. I had no such power or authority to do his work or to show him favor. Or he has no business to come to my table because the work which he is talking about is with another officer XYZ and his file is pending there. So why should he come to me to show favor? So no connection between the parties, no reason to show favor or undue advantage, and etc. is one of the defense taken. Second is animus, that the informant had an animus against me from earlier occasion because I had refused his file, I had rejected his proposal. XYZ reasons may be there. And the third one may be that money has been found with me, but it was not for bribe. This defense is risky and has to be proved by the accused. It has to be proved that the money was not towards bribe, but was towards some legal remuneration or some legal transaction between the parties. Remember, in such type of defenses, the accused admits that tainted money was found with him. Then the prosecution work is lessened to prove that the tainted money was found with him. For taking such defense, bold defense, the accused has to admit that he had accepted the money, but not as a tainted money, not as a reward or not as an undue favor, not as a gratification or a bribe, but for XYZ reason. Then he has to explain that reason. And if that explanation is plausible, proved, then he may get acquittal. Technical defenses of non-sanction, defective sanction, non-application of mind while granting sanction, then not proving of demand and not proving of acceptance. Evidence of pancha is crucial because the complainant is also party to the trap. Therefore, main independent witness is pancha in such cases. Trials in anti-corruption are quite interesting and are fought in great detail. Common people always discuss about a successful lawyer, whether a particular criminal lawyer was successful in removing the anthracene powder or not. In that sense, it's a test for a criminal lawyer to deal with such tricky matters and tricky defenses under the Prevention of Corruption Act. There are various aspects and various angles of a criminal trial as far as Prevention of Corruption Act is concerned. The defenses are limited. Presumption is running against you, but still you have to show that the offense is not proved. Total denial may not be that plausible defense under the Prevention of Corruption Act because your presence in the office, your connection with the documents, your connection with the work is quite easily established. Therefore, a bold defense is necessary on many occasions to be conducted in the criminal trial under the PC Act. No doubt, in spite of such provisions, one can say that corruption has not been reduced to a large extent. However, the amendments and the stringent provisions, now the minimum punishment under the Act is 1 year and it may extend to 7 years. It has been made stringent than the earlier punishment provided under the Act. And though any act may not be complete in itself or it may not be successful in curbing the criminal activities altogether. However, various cases are being tried and punished. Offenders are punished under the act. With various criminal lawyers in each district, the juniors get an opportunity to learn such trials. One more thing interesting about the trials under the PC Act is the offender is a public servant, so he is expected to be a decent offender. And there is a guarantee of fees because he's a public servant and he's a paid employee, or there are sufficient sources to pay the fees of the advocate. And there is no other risk involved as in other matters like gangsters, etc. With this note, I complete my today's lecture, and I have tried to cover the major aspects of the Act. Hope you all have enjoyed it, and I am able to convey at least some knowledge from the prevention of corruption and or in the anti-corruption laws. I am thankful to the Vasantharao Patil Forum as well as the RETA Association led by my friend Harshad Barbade for inviting me to give this lecture. And thank you one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, Shri Kadamji. That was really very enlightening and very, very interesting. And you went through it in much detail. So it was a pleasure listening to you, sir. I would request Ms. Amita ji to kindly moderate the question and answers. Thank you.
Yes.
Amita ji.
Thank you, sir. Sir, first question we have is, does the Act provide for disclosing the income, assets and liabilities, debts of the public servants as well as their family members publicly?
No, it is provided under their service rules, not under the Act. But when you take a defense about this was my known source of income to the department, naturally the question occurs, was the department your superiors knowing about such assets? And then you have to show that those assets were informed to the departmental authorities.
Okay. The second question is from Mr. Rajiv. A case where influencer or influencee are not in any kind of documental exchange, what are the ways to prove undue influence?
When there is no documental exchange, then there has to be, depending upon the oral evidence, there cannot be any other evidence than oral evidence.
Okay, sir.
But normally for public servant, any favor. Now suppose there is a case to arrest or not to arrest by a police officer. As we all know, it's a prerogative of the investigating officer to arrest an offender or not to arrest. It is his prerogative. Now, he may prepare the documents about arresting a person or not offense. He may not.
Yes.
And then in that case, there may not be any documentation. I demanded, right? But then there is again a confirmation that XYZ officer had approached me and he threatened me with the arrest. And he demanded the bribe for not to arresting me or not to put me in that offense. There may not be any documentation in such type of complaint, but it will be oral. Again, the same procedure, confirmation. With the pancha's help, the confirmation through the complainant and the officer that whether there is a really demand, and then the actual acceptance.
Yes. So next question is from Mr. Sandeep Shinde. What would be constitute a public duty under this Act?
Public duty as expected by the law, as expected by the constitution, as expected by the society.
Yes.
It's a common parlance word because public duty is a duty towards public.
Yes. So next question is, if sanction to prosecute is refused by the competent authority, what is the remedy to investigation machinery? What remedy or investigation machinery can have?
If the sanction is not granted.
Yes.
Sanction is not granted, there is no remedy to the prosecuting agency but to drop that case. However, in some cases, once a sanction is refused, another proposal is put up before the other officer in charge of the same authority with the new material, and then they try to get a fresh sanction.
Okay. So that sanction
One of the
can
case,
be applied.
one of the case of high ranks police officer, Mr. Lohar, This issue had come up before the High Court when there was a refusal to sanction, and subsequently it was granted with the according to prosecution on basis of fresh material, and it was argued before High Court that there is no fresh material and this review itself is bad in law.
Thank you
Ultimately,
so much,
the
sir.
High Court.
Sir, moving towards the next question is by Mr. Prashant Kamble. Whether the offense under the Prevention of Corruption Act is bailable or non-bailable offense?
It is non-bailable offense now.
Okay.
Hmm.
Then next question is by Mr. Sandeep Shinde. The bribe giver who cooperates with the authorities, is he liable for action under this act?
He is one way held as an accomplice. But if he has prosecuted the public servant falsely, definitely is liable for an action. Or if he turns away from his original deposition or contention before in the FIR, the affirm statement, and if he tries to save the same public servant in the trial, then he is definitely liable for an action.
Okay, sir. Then moving towards the next question, whether the employees of educational institutions receiving any grants from government fall under the category of public servant?
Yes, under 2C, please see the definition. It covers any
Yes,
cooperative society, any educational institution receiving grant in aid, either by the government or government corporation, are covered under the Act.
okay. Sir, even I would like to know whether there is a procedure for mention for verification and pre and post verification to trap the Panchanama.
Pre-trap Panchanama and post-trap Panchanama, you need to know about verification.
Okay. Then,
Yes. It is always better for the officer to record the verification.
Okay, sir. Then next question is by Mr. Prashant Kamble, who is the competent authority and appointed by central and state government, either or, central or state government.
For
Who is the competent authority?
competent authority is the authority who has power to remove you from service, is the competent authority to grant sanction.
Okay. Then the next question is by Advocate Anil. If demand is made at a verification stage and amount is accepted at a trap stage without
Yes.
demand, would it be an offense under section 13?
It may be one of the lacuna, but still one can prove the case. Actually, the informant is told not to pass over the bribe unless there is a demand.
So then, can that recorded conversation is to be proved during trial, or is there any another compulsory procedure for the same?
No, it has to be given in manuscript to the parties, and it has to be verified. There is a procedure under the our.
Okay, sir. Then the next question is, the Directorate of Technical Education and Maharashtra State Board of Technical Education had refused to grant sanction to
There is a
Anti-Corruption
procedure to
Bureau.
prove the recorded conversation, electronic media. Then it
Yes.
has to be typed, given, confirmed by a competent officer of the court, and then only it can be used in evidence.
Right, sir.
So it was a enlightening session by our very beloved president of AAWI, a very popular member amongst all of us, and seeing the presence of Abhinandan Vagyani, to Harshad Bhadbade, to Kuldeep Patil, the secretary of AAWI, to me and all the RERA Bar Association members. I think that talks about his popularity. He accepted the invitation wholeheartedly, and he's come here, enlightened us on this very crucial subject. I thank Sanjeev Kadam sir from the bottom of my heart on behalf of the Sangli Bar Association and Advocate Basantrao Patil Lawyers Training Center. And I seek permission to conclude today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patilji. That was very nice of you. Very well spoken. Thank you so much. I request Nileshji to share a few words, please.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Advocate Kadam sir to share his time and expertise in this area. He was really very patient and had gone to the act section by section. The way in which he explained this subject was extraordinary. I'm sure this will be benefited by all the participants. It was a wonderful webinar and it was very informative. I'd like to thank on behalf of the RERA Practitioners Association Pune and on my own behalf. Thank you.
Yeah, a very popular maxim comes to our mind that power doesn't corrupt people, but people are the ones who corrupt power. And one famous quote by Albert Einstein that it's not just those who do evil that destroy the moral fabric of the society, but also those who watch on the sidelines without doing nothing. So I think Sir's lecture has made us a lot of, given us a lot of strength and power that we also can make a difference. We also can bring in change. We can be the catalyst of change. So in that context, I believe it was a very wonderful session and very empowering. So that is a word that is coming to our mind right now. Would Mr. Kuldeep sir and Mr. Pramod sir also share a few words, please? Kuldeep ji, you can unmute, please.
Thank you, Harshad. Thank you. Thank you, Sudat. It was really an enlightening session. We had a lot to learn from this. Mr. Kadam elaborated the provisions of the Prevention of Corruption Act and various other provisions in the Indian Penal Code Income Tax Act. It was very informative and we had a lot to gain from this lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kuldeep ji. Thank you very much. Very well spoken, sir. Pramod ji, would you like to share a few words, please?
Thank you, all of you. Today I got the extra knowledge and added in my
Sir, I think your audio is mute.
Yeah.
thank you, all of you. Today I get so many concepts, aspects regarding the concepts of anti-corruption laws. It will be definitely beneficial for all of us in the future, and we will get extra knowledge about the anti-corruption laws, and it will be useful for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pramod ji. On behalf of the Bar Association of Maharera and Maharera Appellate Tribunal and the entire managing committee, the core committee, I thank each and every one of you, especially the Sangli Bar Association, sir, for giving us such a wonderful lecture, and Amita ji for moderating the question answer session. And most importantly, as you can see, we've received so many questions, but we were not able to take all of those questions. We lost connection. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for taking your precious time on a Sunday. It's a holiday, an extended holiday of a holiday. So thank you so much for joining, and we shall give you the details of the next webinar very soon. Thank you, and thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.